Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything.
Right on.
And they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget, millennial entitlement and many others.
Right on, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to RightOnGame.com.
That's RightOnGame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. RightOnGame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds HEPT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Denise Simon Experience. We're going to trot down to the subject of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. Certainly a topic that doesn't get discussed very often. And I would say we have to give a big hat tip to Fred Lucas, who's written a piece over at the Daily Signal on HUD. Fred travels up to the Hill often and kind of checks things out. So Fred does amazing work over there at Heritage. And he's been following some coattails over there at HUD. So with that, thank you, Fred, for joining us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
The Trump administration, I think, what was it, last week or so, presented their proposed budget, and defense is up and several other agencies are their proposed cuts, and rightly so, I would say. And one of them is to housing and urban development. I'm not quite sure I know why we even have this agency anymore. Maybe you can help me with some of that. But in the budget, the proposed budget was to slash HUD by 16%. Yeah. Now, I don't know that that's really going to hurt anything that I see. Do you?
Well, I interviewed Secretary Ben Carson last week about the budget and about a number of topics dealing with HUD. And he said he is supportive of the 16% cut. Of course, that's what you'd expect. The budget recommendations usually come from the cabinet secretaries.
Mm-hmm.
So he's supportive. He points out that it's actually 16% cut from what Congress appropriated last year, but it would be a 7% increase from what the president budget had proposed last year. So it's actually HUD is asking for more than they asked for last year, but it's likely in the end that they're going to get more than they had last time.
Oh, so we have the whacking accounting balance sheet thing.
Yeah, well, right. Well, presidential budgets never get passed hardly, and,
Exactly.
and this will be no exception. But one important thing in this is Secretary Carson, he's been pushing for in HUD, and it's something that's a big part of the Trump administration budget, which is work requirement within HUD. Those getting rental assistance would be required to either work or have job training skills or education requirements for 20 hours per week. So that's something that the goal is to really before Carson came in. Carson sort of switched the goal from measuring success by how many people you can get on the public dole to measuring success as to how many people can gradually lift themselves out of the public dole. And I think that not only saves taxpayer money, but it's I think it's good for the own individual's public spirit in terms of being out there self-sufficient. But there's also some other things, some other big goals he's got is a private sector rehabilitation program. It was actually started under the Obama administration. It's called RAD, so Rental Assistance Demonstration, in which they go out and find existing structures that are really dilapidated and torn down, and they've stopped spending federal money on this. These were things that were built during Johnson and the Great Society program that they went through, and they just built these massive, complex structures, and then they've been, just dilapidated since that time. And now they're getting some private investment from private developers to come in and fix these up, and in some cases run by nonprofits or local governments, and they're transferring them from the federal government supervision into these more private hands, or at least local hands.
Let me ask you kind of almost a somewhere between philosophical and rhetorical question. If housing and urban development was successful, it would work itself out as being an official government agency.
Well, yeah, that could probably be said about any number of any number of agencies, I think. So
now,
but
when we do rental assistance, there are rental assistance is supposed to be really a temporary condition, is it not?
Right. And that is something Carson is actually pushing more towards.
Good. Yeah. But when you got people that are
you did not see that in the previous administration, which was part of basically a party structure that wanted more long-term dependency on government programs. But
I mean, it's almost like the SNAP program, the food stamp program, because if it was effective, you'd have people coming off of it. But when you've got, I would call it kind of legacy rent control or rent assistance. I mean, you got people that are on 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So
Secretary Carson actually talked about that with me. He said that he has visited these housing developments, public housing developments, and he talks to families that have been there 20, 30, 40, 50 years, as you said, and it's just a sort of intergenerational thing, and the goal needs to be reshaped to push current generations and future generations to sort of break this grip that's on them of dependency.
How much the financial burden, Fred, is on the federal government when it comes to housing, I guess, housing assistance and rental assistance? How much is the federal government and then the state government?
That is actually a good question. I think it's more shifting to state and local, and then I mean, and that's been something that's been running for a while in terms of trying to shift things a little bit more to state and local, because which is more in tune with what needs to be done, and states are usually a little bit more innovative, because not necessarily because they're smarter than the federal government, but they know what their communities need, as opposed to a federal bureaucracy in Washington, which is just doing a one-size-fits-all for everyone in the country.
So the money that comes from the federal government into, housing, wherever that housing may be, from California to Illinois, is that done on a block grant kind of basis, or is it done?
Yeah. It goes heavily on block grants. That actually brings up another big point. And you mentioned California. California has one of the most outrageously expensive housing markets, and they've almost eliminated their middle class in that state. With taxes and so many regulations that they've run people out of, basically, prompting people to move elsewhere. But one of the reasons housing is so high there is that is because of various zoning regulations, environmental regulations, and so forth, which raises the price of housing. That hurts poor people. That hurts middle class people too. Carson is moving on a policy that would tie federal housing grants and block grants from HUD that go to these various cities and states with rolling back their own regulations. He says he's talked to a lot of even Democratic mayors who realize that what seemed like a great ideal or a well-intentioned ideal at the time actually does hurt people now, and that they're rolling back. California, I hate to keep picking on California, but California actually adopted a state law that says every new home starting from 2020 has to be built with solar panels. That's going to drive up the cost of construction, which is going to be and it's all to satisfy the conscience of environmental people in that state.
Now the condition of housing into itself, I guess HUD and Carson is having to look at the cost of maintenance and renovation. That's got to be a huge chunk of money there. Either that or you just kind of tear them down. But then when you tear them down, what do you do with all those people?
Well, they're trying to avoid tearing them down. These are such and that's what the RAD program is, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. It's trying to make this entirely a way to incentivize private developers to put some money into this. And so far they've had some success with this. They've gotten $5.8 billion in private investment.
Wow.
They've surpassed building 100,000 new housing units, which could be like a 1-2 bedroom apartments in some cases. But they've and this has been within the past 5 years. It started late in the Obama administration, but did carry over. It was actually, I believe, enacted by after Republicans took over the House. So there was some bipartisan support for the ideal. And Carson says that getting all of this money from the currently there's been over the years, it's been about $26 billion in deferred maintenance for these various units. So still a long way to go, but getting about $5.6 billion is pretty important on this point. And he said if the federal government had tried to do this by itself, it would have taken about 46 years to raise that type of money.
So if you get private investment, what's their incentive? Do they get some kind of cut or some kind of tax incentive?
Right.
How does that work?
They would become private units, or at least locally controlled units, but they would still the rental assistance would still go to the tenant. So and that's been more of a trend previously, in which as these old structures got really old, a lot were being torn down, which is costly to taxpayers too, for that matter, because it's a waste. So this is ultimately trying to, the RAD program. The goal here, at least, is to try to save taxpayer money by not not having to build, but new units, but also preserving the old units that they had, and also what they also do is basically provide Section 8 housing and so forth with private units.
So I kind of go back to my philosophical question.
Okay, right. Understand.
I would say that if, based on where we are economically in the country with a lot of a success due to, some of Trump's policies here, that there ought to be some trends that show that this particular zip code or this, yes. And so does that kind of change the whole chessboard here on where this HUD money is invested or block granted, I should say?
Oh, that is, one would think that, my guess is that, there is the old saying that the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a government program. My guess is that you would really have to demonstrably reduce the caseload before you could make the case to Congress or bureaucrats in DC that such and such is not needed. And of course, the reason a lot of programs are even still around are because of various bureaucratic turf wars in DC, people protecting their jobs, bureaucrats protecting their existence in some cases.
We went through a big scandal during it surfaced during the Obama administration on how the whole mortgage program was, I don't know, it went sideways and corrupt, and houses all over the country and mortgages were going into foreclosures and so forth. Right. Are we under what I would say loan guarantees? Are we is HUD involved in loan guarantees such that we could get ourselves right back into that mess?
That is a good question. That's something I'm not sure about. I know that there were all prior to the housing crisis, there were all these regulations and so forth that did push some irresponsible lending practices out there. Some of that's been rolled back, but a lot hasn't. Of course, the Dodd-Frank bill that was supposed to sold as going to prevent that did nothing to step in really on that front, on the Community Reinvestment Act and so forth. It was
that's
really
what it was.
Largely to blame for some of the housing crisis. Didn't prevent the too big to fail type philosophy either, but that's kind of another issue. There's many things that Dodd-Frank didn't really address in terms of the core of the problem and the housing crisis, which led to the economic disaster in 2008.
So when we have this budget proposal that's slashing the HUD budget by 16%, it's really not doing that. And the way it's being sold out there in the proposed budget is that shame on Trump, he's cutting, HUD by 16%, which is really not the case.
And to be fair, I don't know when the last time a president's budget was fully enacted. You probably my guess is you might even have to go back to Abe Lincoln during the Civil War. Maybe in that case, Congress quickly, since they're in a crisis and a Civil War, we'll just quickly enact the president's budget. But other than that, I kind of possibly when FDR had those really big majorities during the right after the New Deal. But as a general matter, the president's proposed budget is kind of a policy statement or a statement of principles and can serve as guidelines, but for what Congress passes. But for that matter, it's been a really long time since Congress has passed an annual budget. They just go through a series of continuing resolutions.
Right.
What coming up on shutdown deadline, and that gets some hyperbole. Usually doesn't happen. It did happen this year and very briefly last year. So as far as
part of what HUD does too is provide housing for the elderly, and
Sure.
that's looking at a 5% cut. So it's quite fascinating that the left or the Democrats haven't been yelling and screaming about what is proposed for these budget cuts for HUD. It's just because there's too much attention placed to who's putting their hat in the ring to run for the White House.
Yeah. That's part of it. The full focus is, I think, is trying to win in 2020, and a lot of candidates out there, but it's maybe 2 or 3 possibly look serious. So
I guess in my spare time, I have to really kind of look at this entire block grant program, because I mean, when the federal government says they're going to cut this, and well, they're really not. They're just kind of shifting it from one column on the ledger to another column, and they're putting the burdens back on the states for block grant, but the money is still flowing. Correct?
Yeah, and something that the government is good at is just kind of moving money around, saying to kind of sort of a shell game sort of thing. We're not really in as bad a fiscal shape as it may sound like because of this and this and this, and it's kind of moving a few different things around. And
we have to, I think you guys need to kind of give the American people a lesson on how we're supposed to read what is really happening here, because we get these statements almost like platitudes, and voters go, "Oh, that sounds cool," but then it's not that at all. And that's absolutely the case here with HUD, as we've noted.
Well, yeah. We do at the Daily Signal. We try to drill down and try to explain what policies mean as much as possible. I mean, but yeah, I mean, there's always more to just kind of pull back the curtain here. So especially with budgeting and financing. So.
You guys over there are very good at dissecting this stuff, and we need a lesson in figuring out how to do that out here.
And I mean, the very important thing to figure out about the federal government is the word "quote unquote" cut is never really
that.
It's usually a scaling back of a percentage of increase, and that's what they feel to cut in Washington.
I think Newt Gingrich
it's almost always an increase, but never a.
Exactly. He was real good at explaining it once. Maybe we need to go back and take a look at how he said that and whatnot. It's fascinating to hear what is happening over there at HUD, and Fred, we certainly appreciate your work over there on the Hill and trying to drill down on some of these issues and agencies that never really get mentioned. So, Fred Lucas at the Daily Signal, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't subscribe, make sure that you do. Thank you, Fred, and ladies and gentlemen, stay with us because there's more coming your way.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your SIG, Don, short barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard to find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
Ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. We're in a divided country. I mean, we just cannot deny that any longer. So what did I do? Well, I reached out to my distant buddy over there on the left coast, Major Scott Huesing, retired Marine, very, very successful author of Echo and Ramadi. Scott has been on our show several times, 10 deployments, something like 60 countries or something. I mean, just kind of like an overachiever here, I would say. So, Major, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Well, thanks for having me back, and I love being on the show. And I wouldn't use the word distant. I'd say we're close. You and I, we've met and hung out. We share so many close friends. We just are separated by distance. But
yeah,
I love
that's it. That's it. Thank you.
Love,
Thank you.
Love you. Love everybody listening to your program. It's just great to be back on.
Well, in some of this mutual love for each other, I'm going to give you an award. I'm going to make you the Grand Marshal of networking people, because you do an amazing job at within the military community. So you get to be the Grand Marshal. I mean, you've proven the miles and you've proven all that. Now, would you say that's accurate?
Well, I do love connecting people, and I think that I'm always humbled to be in the presence of so many people who I have viewed as my personal heroes and people who have done so much more than me, and just to rub elbows with them and be invited to events. And, you know, last week I was in DC. They were giving Oliver North a leadership award through the Marine Corps University Foundation. I'm surrounded in this room full of probably like 30 generals, and I'm thinking, if Lance Corporal Huesing could see me now, like if he ever thought he would be sitting here, like it's a mind blower. But with that, I feel like I want to pay it forward, and I have a responsibility to really share those contacts, and I don't ever soccer mom that stuff and keep it all to myself, because I think it's important to share people in your network like you and so many other great people in this industry of media and storytelling, because there's a lot of great stories out there. And if you don't share that, I think some of them get kicked by the wayside, and that's to me just a shame. So I just love doing it. It really makes me happy.
Well, networking is about the human connection. And so we had a pretty cool event this week where Johnny Walker, whose real name has got like 5 names in it. So, I mean, we'll just, it begins with Riyadh, and I'll just leave it at that one. But somehow Johnny, who is the author of
Codename Johnny Walker.
Yeah. Codename Johnny Walker. And I think there's a movie that is in production on the same thing.
It is.
So we got 2 books going here. We got Echo and Ramadi and Codename Johnny Walker. But let me say this. I think Johnny, if you hear any piece parts about his story, he knew early on about the human connection because he was from Iraq. And he reached out genuinely with his own sacrifice and life to the U.S. military. And, the military has certainly returned the favor. So it's a forever relationship. Did I get some of that right?
It is. And for the listeners, Johnny Walker fought alongside our special forces and Navy SEALs in cities like Ramadi and Mosul and Fallujah. And he grew up in that area. And just like Big Sam, who's been on your program, who's a good friend of ours and was my interpreter, he decided at one point, like, I've had enough and I have to fight back. But here's what's interesting between Johnny's relationship with me and Sam's, how it's different is rewind back to Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And if you read Johnny's book, I won't give it all away, but Johnny was a young Iraqi soldier fighting in an anti-aircraft battalion, fighting the U.S. I was a young U.S. Marine doing the same thing. So we were essentially fighting against each other. Now, we weren't, trench to trench slugging it out, but we were in the same combat zone. We were fighting each other. And then you fast forward 15 years to the streets of Ramadi, and Johnny's working for the SEALs who are on our flank. We're in the bowels of Ramadi, slugging it out, killing insurgents, and trying to make a difference. And then we leave that arena. He comes to America. I come back home. We both write these amazing stories, become best-selling authors, and now we hang out and barbecue and drink wine at my ranch here in Temecula, California. And to be
the irony,
it's a beautiful story in between us as friends. And to go down on Wednesday to San Diego to the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service and watch Johnny get sworn in as an American citizen. And if you go to @EchoandRamadi or Johnny Walker on social media, you can see the videos I posted of 1,394 brand new Americans reciting the Pledge of Allegiance for the first time that it counted. And man, if you don't get emotional and you need to recharge your cup of America, watch that video. And it's so cool because you think about that, put it in perspective. That was almost 1,500 people in San Diego that day. It happens in every city around this country in every day. Sometimes 2-3 times a day they hold those ceremonies, like in Tampa, where I watched Big Sam get sworn in last year. It's just amazing. It's just really inspiring. And those people that Johnny was surrounded by, 84 different countries, American success stories.
I did get to be a little bit of a part of that. Carolyn Smith was kind enough to do a video. Carolyn's been on the show. And,
I love it.
And so I did certainly watch it. And then it was such a surprise because Fox News later that night had Johnny Walker on there to talk about the story. Mm-hmm. You could do an hour or 2 or 3 about his story, but for somebody that grew up in Iraq in essentially a war zone pretty much all of his life, recognized early that this is nuts. It's just nuts, and he bought into the whole culture of America. And you guys certainly paid it forward, bringing him here and advancing all the paperwork. I mean, this is what took 15, 16 years for him to get through this whole process to become a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, 16 years to get his paperwork finalized, and it was through his Navy SEAL comrades that guys like Jason Touche that really put the wherewithal to make that happen. They were instrumental in finalizing that, and there were some setbacks and just the bureaucracy of it all. But to get to where he's at today, I mean, you think about that, 16 years. Are you willing to do that to move to any other country besides the United States of America? Would you move to
and not give up?
Yeah, would you move to Canada or Mexico or France and wait 16 years through their system to do that? It's a testament to what this country provides and why those naturalized citizens are so grateful, why it's so special to them to hold that flag in their hand, that tiny little flag, and wave it for the first time. And, you know, Johnny Walker is the only one of very few, I assume, to wear the Navy SEAL trident and be authorized to wear it. That's how in depth his connection goes to our Navy and our U.S. Navy SEALs. They adopted him as one of their own to the point where they said, "You're going to wear the Navy SEAL trident," and that's
major.
Obviously, yeah, that's a pretty big deal in their community, because that's not something they just hand out like bumper stickers. It's a really big honor, and I think it's a testament to the love that the Navy and those sailors have towards Johnny, to the sacrifice and putting his life on the line day in and day out. I mean, that guy wasn't in the rear with the gear just, you know, hanging out. He was up front with a rifle in his hand, kicking in doors with these guys and doing our nation's bidding in some of the deadliest cities throughout this war we're fighting.
You mentioned Big Sam. We've got Johnny Walker, but I would also say that, you know, we have some in Afghanistan that are doing the same thing. So, you know, this war on terror thing, there is a silver lining in it all, because we have been able to plant some seeds of liberties and freedoms and values and human rights in places that, with the human connection, I would add, that we never thought would take hold. Is that right, Scott?
Yeah, that's a great point. And when you think about guys like Johnny and Sam and Ford and these amazing interpreters who I say are akin to our American Revolutionary War patriots who have this deep love of country, for every one of those guys, there's probably 20, 30, 50 that we can't get over here. And if there's anybody that should have a rubber stamp pass to get citizenship, to be expedited as a U.S. citizen, these are the people that our State Department needs to charter a plane, fly it back over to the Middle East, and say, hey, hop on the bus, boys. You paid your dues. You rate to be Americans, and we're going to make that happen for you if you choose to do so. And we have this bureaucratic system that is oftentimes a hindrance to these people. And there's so many Americans now, when you're 5,000 miles away and there's a 7 or 10 hour time difference to coordinate all that, I don't think people understand the logistics that are involved in the hours of your life you commit to filling out paperwork and waiting on responses back from this, bureaucratic system at the State Department to really make this happen. So just to give the listeners some perspective of what our military, what our veterans do to really help not just Johnny, but his whole family. I mean, his wife Beta is over here now, and his kids are over here. Fatima and Mustafa are here too, and they're American citizens now. It's remarkable. It just is remarkable.
Scott, there are millions and millions of citizens or people that are displaced from their home country now. Millions. I mean, we got them from China. We've got them from Afghanistan. We've got them from Saudi Arabia, Syria. I mean, Honduras, El Salvador. And, we have some representation of all of them here in the United States. and I know that Johnny would like to see Iraq, and Big Sam would like to see Iraq just kind of come into the 21st century somehow. Be able to impart some of what made America what it is. That I'm a big fan of. In a high tide, all boats rise. How come we cannot take some of these displaced people, that some number of the millions, and they can't, I guess, use their loyalty or their home country and what they've learned in America and help us with the State Department, I might add, the diplomatic corps, and say, come on, Honduras, come on, Syria. We've got something else that we need to do here. Is that just kind of a unicorn dream of mine?
I don't know if it's a pipe dream. I think that those countries, and you can pick any flavor of country, if they have a desire to come to America, or conversely, bring some semblance of what Western culture has to them to help them advance, I think that's a step forward. But I've said this time and again that we as a military, as we go in and do what we do at the tactical level, we're not there to be occupiers or to change a culture that's been around for 5,000 years. That's just American hubris at its best to think we can do that. But there's nothing wrong with wanting democracy around the world. And it's not, again, American democracy. It's not Iraqi democracy. There's only one flavor of democracy, Denise: democracy. And this is how the system works. And until our political and administrative leaders figure out a way to balance that out between those who run these countries and the people that are wanting to take part in those systems, we're going to continue to repeat these same mistakes. We're going to continue to see these sad cases of people who get displaced, who don't want any part of their government because the governments in and of themselves are so completely dysfunctional. They're unwilling or corrupt, and they don't want to move forward into this century and offer the people that they're serving a better way of life, in my opinion.
The State Department seems to be exploiting what I would say the military has done in its history. You guys are over there, certainly fighting a ground war and an air war, in military hostilities. But when you guys embed with an awful lot of people in their home country in these battles, you're imparting some interesting things as you go through day after day in these battles. Now, we're seeing, I think, some exploitation of the State Department with Iran, because we're standing with the Iranian people saying, hey, you need to do something about your regime. We're also seeing it in a non-Islamic country in Venezuela. So do you believe that some of the work that the military has done somewhat as a byproduct has had some real value in that regard, that the State Department and the diplomatic U.S. foreign policy can take that and run with it?
Well, I think the two departments absolutely need to be working in concert with each other, but they have absolutely different missions, as you're well aware. The military machine, we're really good at breaking stuff up. The State Department should be really good at building stuff up and employing all of those agencies and tools in those countries so they can repair and restore those programs and those institutions of government that make them function well. And I love Mike Pompeo. I think he's doing a great job. And I think that, Secretary Shanahan, when he took over for Jim Mattis, those are big shoes to fill. But I hope that those agencies are talking, and when they come out of their lunch meetings every week, they're sharing information with their subordinates so they can come up with a plan with whichever country our military is engaged in and really define what the end state is, not just their overarching goals, but what is winning. what is the definition of victory in Iraq and Afghanistan? How does our involvement in any country, whether it's Venezuela, Central America, the Middle East, how does our presence there, Denise, enhance our national security? And I think that's the real underlying question that needs to be answered. And it's become this academic discussion when it shouldn't be an academic discussion. This should be a policy issue and people should be making statements of how this is clearly defined, not just to our nation's military leaders at the senior levels and lowest level, but to the American public on why we are spending all of our tax dollars to send people overseas, whether it's a small foreign internal defense group from our special forces to a full-scale military deployment to fight an insurgency in any one of these areas. I think those relationships at our administrative levels, they need to be clearly stated.
We get to announce officially that the caliphate, the Islamic State caliphate in Syria, in the city of Baghouz, has been completely eliminated. Now, I would say that is a colossal victory, a war victory for the United States, with some help of allied countries. But the kind of help that they gave us, I guess, into itself has to be dissected. But what we did is we teamed with the Syrian Kurds and the Iraqi Kurds in order to do this. So we've got and we're not trying to occupy. We never tried to occupy Syria. Tell me what you think that the military feels at this point because of this victory that we have, I guess, cleaned up in some regards Syria, but that ideology is still spreading out there.
Well, again, using as a writer, words have meaning, and I'm a firm believer in that, and using the right words. From the onset of this war, the war on terror, how do you fight terror? It's the wrong word to use. And to say we've defeated a caliphate, how do you defeat an Islamic State that's loosely under the leadership of some Islamic steward? How do you do that? So we really need to define the terms in which we use, and what is our metric of success to say we've defeated an Islamic caliphate? I just think that it's wrong verbiage to talk about. And what does that mean? How do you measure that? How do you explain that to the American public or to the world stage that we have crushed this caliphate or this, this jihadist movement against, American values or Western culture? What did they tear down all the billboards and you can't see it on the highways? We've scraped up all the bumper stickers. That hasn't happened. You can't do that at the lowest level when these people are inside their homes, inside villages, still talking about their deep-seated hatred towards American values and Western culture. So I think it's really, again, back to the administrative and political leadership to define clearly and not use all of this rhetoric and these glossy terms that the majority of the public just don't understand. And if they don't, just Google it to figure it out for yourself and be a lifelong learner about what's going on in the world stage. So to say that we've defeated that, I think is probably window dressing, in my opinion. I don't think it's over. I don't think it will ever be over until we establish a presence in the Middle East to provide regional stability. And you've heard me talk about this before, is without that regional stability, without a physical presence saying, hey, we're here for you. We're right next door. We're going to be here for you. We're going to help you develop. We're going to let you use our tools and our resources to help you move forward, just like we did in the Pacific Rim, just like we did in the European theater after World War II. Today, we are failing to be good students of our history, and the result is going to be another massive deployment 10 years from now back in the Middle East, fighting the same war against the kids of the same people we've continued to piss off for the last 15 years.
I go back to almost Tahrir Square. Remember the Arab Spring? You had an awful lot of Egyptians that protested the government. And I think that is what Pompeo and the U.S. policy is, to kind of take that model and apply it in, say, Venezuela or Honduras or Syria or Iraq or, any Venezuela. So the work is clearly unfinished. I mean, some of these ideologies, as you say, cannot necessarily be defeated until there is pressure from the guy next door. I mean, meaning the neighbor, meaning their own citizens. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And you think about the Arab Spring. That was almost a decade ago. While we're still fighting this war, and you can have tens of thousands of Arabs, rising up saying we want a better government, we want these type of elections. And try and compare that to the types of protests that we have here in this government, and how effective are American protests in changing policy and doctrine at our administrative and political levels. And then think about a culture that is still struggling to develop a democracy in some of the people, and it could be in Iraq, it could be in Iran, where we've seen some of that, and those two neighbors are so closely tied. How do you, again, find a metric of success for those people in those countries that want to make a difference, they want to make change, but they have absolutely no influence against their government? And when they do, bad things happen to those people at night when they go to bed. That's the really hard truth of it all.
Well said. Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with retired Marine Major Scott Huesing, the author of Echo Ramadi. If you haven't read the book, shame on you, go get it. And the other one that we invite you to read is Johnny Walker's story, which is his book, codenamed Johnny Walker. We're going to come into a break, and you actually helped me with the segue, Mr. Scott, on where we're going to come into the discussion on the other side of the break. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.
Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything,
Right on.
and they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget millennial entitlement and many others.
Right On, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to rightongame.com.
That's rightongame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's rightongame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
Rightongame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. Rightongame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 435-921. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4739er, 89er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds HEPT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And thanks for staying with us, ladies and gentlemen, on the Denise Simon Experience. We're having, I don't want to call it a philosophical, I want to almost call it a cogent conversation with retired Marine Major Scott Huesing, author of Echo and Ramadi. Before we went to break, Scott, you kind of gave me an entree to my next question here, and thank you for that. And I would say that, you know, the United States today is in a huge divided era. We're a divided country here. So, given what we have just covered in the last segment, in your daily travels, and I've appointed you, remember, the Grand Marshal, maybe I'll promote you to Ambassador of Social Relationships. How would you take what you have learned, certainly by virtue of being in military hostilities, being a Marine, being in the human connection business, and with your book, are there any solutions that you have come to on how we can close this divided country that we're in ourselves? Whoa, what a question.
Yeah, wow, that is very cogent, to say the least. You know, there's just a gross lack of understanding, I think, in mainstream media on what the important issues are. And when we have, whether it's an actual journalist or a commentator who's just regurgitating other people's comments and all of the nightly news, and they are so ingrained in what they're all talking about instead of the real issues, I think that's one problem. I think that you get this minuscule lens of the actual problems and providing solutions to the problems. The mainstream media is constantly either talking about the problems without solutions, and when there are not enough problems to talk about, they talk about each other and
or create new ones.
Yeah, it's this ridiculous self-licking ice cream cone that the media cycle, which has become the only source of information that the American public seem to digest, instead of learning about the issues and making proposals on how to bridge these gaps in American culture. And I think that we are so focused on the minority negativity of those that have bad things to say, and you could say the word disparaging things to say against America and where we're heading, and this negativity. I got news for anybody that has that mindset about this administration. Love him or hate him, President Trump, love him or hate him, Barack Obama, having pride in your country and understanding that this is absolutely the best place to live on the planet is indisputable in my opinion. And that's coming from a guy that has been to some of the most third world, rat holes that I've seen firsthand, the way these governments treat their people. And until you get out of your house, until you get away from your TV set and you experience this personally and really gain some perspective, it really isn't going to happen to have a full understanding of how great you have it here. I mean, anybody in this country can drive down to their local convenience store and buy anything from beer to gas to milk to a 3D viewfinder for your iPhone just at a local convenience store. And in these other countries, you're waiting in line for hours just to get a tank of gas in some of the most oil-rich countries in the world. So when we're talking about being a divisive country, my solution is start talking and reporting about the real issues and what our politicians are proposing as solutions so we can talk about the solutions to the problems. Yes, I like that solution. Hey, that's a stupid idea. That's a bad solution because I have experience in this area, and really bringing in that corporate resident-based knowledge to address these problems. I think until we get to that point, until we start reporting and informing the American public through whatever channels it is, we're still going to continue to struggle. I don't mean to sound pessimistic because I'm a very hopeful person. I'm a glasses half full guy. I love to write about things like that, about what's going on in the veteran community that are great, these great success stories. But I also write about things that are going wrong when we make bad policy decisions. And I try and keep those opinions very apolitical because I want them to affect not Democrats and Republicans. I want to show people how they affect America. And we are Americans, and you have to take pride in that. And in the first segment, we were given so many great examples of what it really means to become an American and not just take for granted that I'm an American, I live here. I should be entitled to all of this. You have to earn it. You have to continue to develop it and cultivate this American culture and show the world that we're still number one.
I have traveled the world myself, but not in a military component, but generally on business. And I can tell you that I have been into mainland China, into some very small places that have never seen anything outside of their small village. The same thing in Egypt, years and years and years ago. And it's, you said it right. You get on a plane and you head home and you land at the airport. And you think, God, I'm just so glad to be home because of what you've seen and what you've experienced, the smells, the sights, the things that are lacking. And I know that you guys in the military during your deployments, you see a lot of those things too. Is there a lot of frustration when you guys return home and think, how do we fix this other component? It's got to be something that almost haunts you guys in your deployments. Would that be right?
Well, I don't think we ever sit around as guys and women that have fought and sacrificed for years and months of our life, and we pine and say, oh, woe is me, all the blood, all the loss of life, all the treasure we've expended in this region, in this war, is for naught. I don't think we do that. I don't hear that in the circles that I run in, from the young Marines that I fought alongside with in Ramadi to senior level officials who are now, senior field grade officers to general level officers who've moved on to policy and decision making arenas. We don't ever hear that. I don't think they care about that in the sense that it was a waste of their time because they were fighting for they were fighting for our country and what we believe in. The discussions we have are, how do we win? How do we define winning? And that's going to take a clear statement from President Trump, from this administration, on what we're going to do to claim victory. And I don't know if I shared this with you, but during the midterm elections, I heard President Trump getting ironed out by some Sky News reporter about taking a defeat and they didn't have a victory in the midterms. And President Trump said something to the effect that, well, it was kind of a sort of a victory. And it hit me. And I said, this is my commander in chief. And he said it was kind of a sort of a victory. And I'm thinking to myself, what is that? There's no such thing as a kind of sort of a victory. You either win or you lose. And that's a cold slap in the face to anyone who's ever fought in a war and needs to understand that there are two types of people when you go to war or when you try and impose your political power through the military machine in any country, even through diplomatic means. There's winning and losing. And we have not done that. And that's what we talk about in the veteran community.
Fascinating, because you got something between policy, foreign policy, and the diplomatic machine that knows that these things are coming. They can be predicted. Then the Pentagon, you got the war gamers. I mean, they're watching all this. Same thing as the CIA. We try and do whatever we try and do. We fail. We have to send in the military. We do whatever we do. We win. We, stabilize. We leave. We have to go back. Then we leave again, and then it goes right back to the CIA and the policy people. So, I mean, it's just kind of a triangulation of a constant, rotation, right?
It is. And, all these things we're talking about, Denise, about, winning and tolerance and bridging the gap and bringing America together, and about our nation's warfighters. As a professional soldier and as a Marine, a lot of people may look at us through the lens as these, bloodthirsty, deadly machines that are employed on the battlefield, which we absolutely are. We have the best military in the world. But I will say this, for those that don't know, is that our soldiers and Marines that do this, we are absolutely lethal at what we do. But by far, we have helped more people and have been kind and shown love to more people in these foreign countries that we go in and fight these wars than we do kill. We help the people that we're surrounded by, just like we did in Ramadi, in Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is the problem when you're talking about how do we fix this problem. We figure this out in the military community because we're so tightly knit, is that you got to be kind and nice to each other and be tolerant and understanding of cultures. And we get this at the lowest level. If our politicians and those in politics can employ that same thing and show leadership that we are unified as a political structure, maybe, just maybe, that would trickle down and we'd be more effective at what we're doing on the world stage and we'd be viewed in a better light. But the guys that are doing it at the lowest level really have a fundamental understanding of that. And again, another point of discussion for our military and veteran community is we really wish there'd be some teamwork and some leadership and decisiveness at the highest levels to really make what we're doing matter.
Oh, I like it. I like it a lot. I spend a lot of time personally in foreign policy, and I just see that, some of the things that we do and try and pay for and throw money at is nuts. Since your book, Echo and Ramadi, and you doing your appearances and you showing up for these events and even being a speaker at some events, what unexpected things have you learned in your travels since the success of your book?
The power of sharing your story and how it's emblematic, not just to one small group like the Marines and soldiers I fought with, and how meaningful and, again, emblematic it is to so many people, civilians, veterans, and people from around the world that reach out to me and say thank you for sharing that story, and really have an understanding of those things I talk about in the book. That, again, it's not a war story. It's a story about people and about leadership and team building, overcoming adversity, and how we brought that all back home with us, and we continue to be supported. And to be surrounded and immersed in so many different arenas, well outside my military circles, in the private sector, in academia. It just never ceases to amaze me, the amount of love and this awakening that people have to really understand that the things that our nation's military have done and the sacrifices they've made become apparent to them when they read Echo and Ramadi. That type of feedback to me and that type of connection, I never thought about it as something to validate what I did when I wrote this story, and I shared the stories of over 7,500 interviews I did when I wrote this book. But that is so extremely powerful to me when those messages come across my desk, or when I'm speaking, or I drove through the gate to a change of command recently, and as I pull out my ID card to the young Marine, it was a Marine base, and I showed him my ID card. He looked at it and smiled. He goes, "Oh, I know who you are, sir. I read your book." I was like,
Aww.
oh my God. It was like, I almost started crying right there. It was just, when you're able to reach so many people, I think that it really does validate the importance of writing. It validates the importance of capturing moments in history that have made a difference, and to share that with other people. I'm very lucky because I use the word capacity a lot, and not everybody has to spill their guts in a book or a magazine article to do that. There's a lot of different mediums and forms, and you're, again, a big part of that, to have so many cool people on, the Denise Simon experience, to share those. But when you get that feedback, you're like, man, it was worth it. It was worth the year of my life. I locked myself in my studio, and the painstaking hours of editing and research and making sure you get the story right. And that's probably been the best part, is just like the story in Echo and Ramadi is about people. My last year, as I've gone across the nation and spoken to, 30 different organizations and been on over 300 radio shows and TV shows, every person I meet is just become a part of this great support network. And I love you too, because you're part of it.
Thank you. And it's mutual for sure. And in your travels, you've learned thousands of other stories that have, I think you got another job. You've got to write, a sequel to Echo and Ramadi, because as some of these veterans are getting old and dying off, Korea, Pearl Harbor, now Vietnam, I don't want their stories to just sort of fade away and never be heard. So you've got to have another book in you, or I would argue a documentary. Because there's lessons to be learned, because they're proven facts of the good that America's about. Are you up to that task?
I'm working on 2 books simultaneously right now, and I signed a contract for my documentary last November with a very good friend who is up in Hollywood. His name's Anthony Zucker. He created this little TV series called CSI, which most people have heard of. And he loves veterans, loves our military. And when I told him about the project I wanted to start on, he said, I'm in 1,000,000%. And so we've got the treatment done, which is the script, and we're putting all the pieces together. And it's going to be another great snapshot of historical time, interviewing some great people. My other book is a contemporary piece, which talks about all these issues that are going on, things that I've written op-eds about in USA Today and the Town Hall and Daily Signal, all of these things that I couldn't cover in 800 words or less. I'm putting all those together. And then the other book is about another great American hero who was an attack helicopter pilot that got shot down in 2004 over the city of Najaf. So keeps me pretty busy. But again, you're right. I love sharing those stories. And again, that capacity to be able to not just share my story in Echo and Ramadi, but every time I travel around as a nosy person, I'm like, oh God, that's a great story. I should write that story. Or like, oh, tell me more about this. Like, can I do an interview? And I just always want to hear these amazing stories because they're out there. And if I can't do them all myself, which I can't, I try and inspire other people who want to write, who want to get into this business of writing and storytelling to help them along and share my network and contacts. Like, this is how you do it. And you put the work in, and it's not easy. Books don't write themselves. So you have to be willing to do the work, but you have to love what you do. And this is what keeps me going at the beginning and the end of every single day is I love helping veterans. I love and am honored and grateful to what the Marine Corps gave to me, from this kid who is barely squeaking out of high school with a 1.24 GPA to a guy who's now, autographing books to guys like Joe Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Sergeant Major John Troxell, his right-hand man, and commandants of my Marine Corps. It's humbling, and I never take that for granted.
Well, it ends up becoming another responsibility that I'm not sure that you necessarily asked for, but now that you got it, I think that you're accepting it willfully and gleefully. And you might have to just put out a call to action there, Scott, that says, hey, all of you guys that want to tell a story, write them down and send them to me, and then, compile them, and, a book can necessarily write itself. These guys in their own words as they have it typed out. Scott, it's been a real pleasure to have you again on the show, the Denise Simon Experience. There's nothing better than to learn about some event that we had no idea about and have it in context, have it in a timeline, see how it relates. Winning hearts and minds. I know that is part of the war on terror component, but we've got to necessarily apply some of that here. And I think you're just the Marine to do it. So we're so blessed to have you on the Denise Simon Experience again. I'm going to call on you from time to time. Big hugs to you, and certainly to Johnny and Big Sam, and we're anticipating more stories to come. So thank you, Major Scott Huesing. And ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way, so stay with us.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your SIG, Don, short-barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard-to-find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey, gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. A little bit in the news, just kind of a blip, and that is John Walker Lind. John Walker Lind was otherwise known as Detainee 001. My buddy here that has agreed to be with us on the Denise Simon Experience is Patrick Dunleavy. Patrick has written a book, The Fertile Soil of Jihad. He was the Deputy Inspector General for New York State Bureau of Prisons, and he's a big, huge contributor to the investigativeproject.org. And we want to talk about some of these, I don't know what we call them, Patrick. American citizens decided that going to militant Islam and joining jihad, we've caught a bunch of them. They're in prison, but they're soon to be released because they've served their sentence. But the first one here is John Walker Lind. Very fascinating case. One, because I guess let's start off with, how is it that he even knew about the Taliban and was able to travel to, Pakistan and then to Afghanistan to join the Taliban to start with?
Well, that's an interesting question. And John Walker Lind, when he was about the age of 10, going in towards his teen years, was looking for a moral structure in his life. His family was having some issues between the father and the mother. He was raised as a Catholic, and his mother was a Buddhist. So he's looking for some sort of moral structure, and that led him to Islam. And the way he learned about Islam is through the internet. Very fascinating that he was first attracted through the internet, and from his conversion there, he made contacts and went over to Yemen, Pakistan. He also fought in Kashmir in Afghanistan. So he was primed as a young teenager towards this cause of Islam and this form of Islam that wanted jihad as one of the tenets of Islam. That's how he became.
You would think a teenager wouldn't want to get involved in all that, but I think he went to Yemen to learn Arabic, and just, I guess,
there's a lot of so-called Arabic language students who later on became jihadists. We have tracked some of them who went to Yemen for that, and Yemen at that time was a very hotbed of Islam, and was attracting foreign individuals, young men particularly, under the guise of, well, you'll study Arabic. But, well, the way you're going to study Arabic is to study the Quran, and the way you're going to study the Quran is the way we teach it in a Salafist way. But again, the reason he did that is there was some moral ambiguity in his life. His father had recently come out as a gay man. His mother and father were going through a divorce. So he fit that prime profile of somebody looking for some sort of stability. And he was easily attracted towards that form of Islam. that teaches that those things are haram or forbidden or evil. But even after he got arrested, actually captured, he was more than just a criminal. He had actually been involved fighting alongside the Taliban and also other jihadists. Many believe that he also had fought alongside Al-Qaeda. When he was captured in 2001, he was being held in a prison in Maha Sharif in Afghanistan, and he was going to be interviewed by a CIA operations officer by the name of Michael Spann.
Mm-hmm.
Mickey Spann, he was known as. And Mickey and his partner interviewed John Walker Lynn in that prison, and Lynn never told them anything about what was going on back inside that prison. Back inside the prison, the other inmates, the other jihadists, had gathered weapons and explosive devices and were ready to start a riot and to break out and try to escape. Many, when that riot occurred, Mickey Spann was killed. He was the first U.S. officer killed in Afghanistan. Many people forget him. Many people, and I've communicated with the Spann family, felt that in some ways John Walker Lynn was responsible because he withheld information that he had regarding that pending prison revolt. So he was more than just, I have been radicalized and became somewhat of a jihadist. He actually took up arms against the United States. He's an enemy combatant. He's not just a common criminal who kind of strayed along.
And Patrick, in 2001, this was at the very beginnings of what is commonly known as the War on Terror.
Right.
We didn't know what to do with these people. I mean, it had to be a colossal shock to those that had ridden in on horseback in the early days of going into Afghanistan, and we come into this fight and this Taliban and, trying to gather these people up. And so, and there's an American in this mix. I mean, okay, what do we do now? What in the world do we do now? You just treat him as an enemy combatant? Does he get special privileges because he's a U.S. citizen? Had he been kidnapped? It had to be absolute legal policy chaos at that moment, right?
Right, and what went back and forth was those two arguments. Is he an enemy combatant? Is he a criminal? What happened is his family had some financial resources, and they got an attorney, and they were able to cut a deal. He pled. This was a deal cut with the Department of Justice to be sentenced to 20 years in prison as a criminal, and he was not treated as an enemy combatant and sent to Gitmo, to Guantanamo, with the other enemy combatants we had captured. And so once he went into the prison system or the Department of Justice system, he was afforded rights. Now, interesting articles have been out about his pending release. One of them, which I took issue with, was written by James J. Carafano, who was a noted intelligence and military expert. And his argument was, John Walker Lynn is going free. Should we worried about it? And his answer to that question was, so what? He kind of minimizes. He says, well, he was a terrorist, but we had him in prison, and he's no longer a threat. And even if he is a threat, well, we'll watch over him. Well, the thing that Mr. Carafano overlooks is the influence that John Walker Lynn had in the U.S. prison system, particularly towards radical Islamists. He was involved in a lawsuit. In fact, he was the lead inmate in that lawsuit that was filed against the Bureau of Prisons and the Department of Justice, seeking their religious freedom restoration rights, that he had to pray 5 times a day. And when the prison authority said, sure, you can pray as many times as you want, he said, no, my particular form of Islam says that it must be corporate prayer. I must meet with the
communal.
Other. That's right. And he won that case. The reason he won it is the judge, the federal judge in that, judge by the name of Magnus Stinson, reviewed the case and said, well, yes, he is convicted of terrorist acts. However, his nonviolent disciplinary history during his prison time has merited him a classification of low security. So what the judge was saying is, okay, so you're a terrorist, but he's a good boy in prison. He's not rioting and stuff like this. And that gave him the right to do that. Now, other jihadists have followed suit with that. So I guess what I'm saying is Mr. Carafano overlooks John Walker Lynn's influence on others in prison. Now, the other thing that Mr. Carafano brings out is, well, if he does get on, if he does get out, if he goes to Ireland or wherever he goes, we're going to put him on a terrorist watch list, and we'll be able to keep track of him. What Mr. Carafano again failed to note is that the Inspector General for the Department of Justice just came out with a report where the FBI failed to properly vet the workers in the maritime industry, those that work in port of entries and stuff like that, that many of those individuals were on the TSA terrorist watch list, and yet the FBI overlooked them and approved them to work in the ports. So we know that there's failures on these watch lists. If Mr. Carafano is so confident that John Walker Lynn will not somehow slip through the cracks, perhaps he might want him to live in his neighborhood.
Look, John Walker Lynn was sentenced to 20 years. Looking back now, was that really? I guess we have an issue of sedition. We have an issue of treason, which is really indisputable here, Patrick. So 20 years hardly seems like enough, but 20 years it was. So he's still in Terre Haute, I guess, in a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Right.
He got, with the help of, his grandmother and, several other people, Irish citizenship. And It is said that when he's released, he's going to go to Ireland. Well, wait. Ireland is going to take a long look at this and go, well, we were stupid to, one, give him citizenship, but two, there's nothing said that he still wouldn't have like dual citizenship, and that Ireland may not give him a passport. They may not take him at all. And then he's stuck here. And so we have a walking jihadist running around California or Washington State or wherever he ends up. So you're right. I think that Jim Carafano is kind of minimizing some consequences here, correct?
Yeah, and it gets to the greater problem, which we've talked about and written about over a period of time, is that the United States is ill prepared for convicted jihadists who are getting out of prison. Now, John Walker Lynn is the poster boy because more Americans would know about him since his media attention. But he's not the only one. I don't know if you remember the case. It was a case of an inmate in California State Prison. He formed a terrorist group while he was in prison, declared war on the United States, and began to coordinate attacks with other individuals. His name was Kevin James. He was actually convicted of sedition against the United States. Well, he's going to get out of prison 6 months after John Walker Lynn.
Yeah, the Counter Extremism Project, I think, just came out with a piece and said, whoa, it isn't just about John Walker Lynn. There's an estimated 60 that will be released here within the next, 10 or 12 months. Now, we don't have the resources to be, tailing these people. But we didn't know any better back then. So I think we've got a colossal problem on our hands. 60.
Well, there has been some initiatives put forward, and one is what myself and some others have called for is a terrorist registration or a terrorist registration list, very similar to a sex offender list, that would keep track of individuals who were convicted of terrorist-related crimes once they're released from prison. And this information is forwarded down to the local authorities so that, for instance, Kevin James, who plotted to blow up synagogues as well as declared war on the United States, the law enforcement in that community where he now resides would be aware of that information. The information wouldn't just be to create a terrorist watch list like the TSA had, but it would actually be a registry that works like the sex offender registry, that knows where you live, where you work, what are all the conditions of your release, what time do you have to be in your house, and stuff like that. There's been some progress on that, but it is stalled somewhat in the Senate right now.
All right, I'm gonna throw some sand in the gears here, and hopefully you'll know, because you're so smart, you'll know what to do with it. We've essentially said that we have liberated the town of Barghouth in Syria, and
Right.
the Kurds have a pile of Islamic State fighters in detention. The Syrian Defense Force has a very large pile of Islamic State fighters in detention. The CIA has been tasked with going through, along with our military, each person, case by case by case, and determining what to do with them, send them back to their home countries. The home countries aren't going to take them, but they're in somebody's possession right now, and they could end up being in our possession. So there is some chatter that Britain says, we don't want them back, but we'll pay you, the United States, to go put them in Guantanamo. Now, we don't know where that's necessarily going to lead, but I'm arguing that not beyond John Walker Lind and these others 60 or so that could get out here in the next 12 months, we may have 3 or 4 times that number. So it's a wider problem that's manifesting. Did I get that right, Patrick?
Yeah, and what you did is you exposed the 2 particular issues when it comes to enemy combatants, such as like John Walker Lind or the individuals that are being held in Syria. How do we treat them? Do we treat them in the criminal justice system, or do we treat them as enemy combatants in a war? Andy McCarthy, the former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, has written extensively on that, in regard to how these individuals ought to be, if we're going to treat them as common criminals, there are certain caveats that we have to look at, such as, like I said, the affording of rights. So many of these guys in prison right now are filing lawsuits because their conditions of confinement they don't like them. The underwear bomber, he's filed a lawsuit because he doesn't like the cell that he's in, or the other conditions. So if we do that, if we treat them as criminals, this is the avenue we go down. If we treat them as enemy combatants and we hold them, then there has to be some sort of legislation to give clear direction as to how they're to be treated. But we've kind of juggled this back and forth for the last 18 years. And the decision still hasn't been made. Now, if we take these people into Guantanamo, the argument has always been, well, this incites or inflames others to join the cause. That's nonsense. We've held the individuals before during armed conflict. So I think that's the issue that comes to the forefront. How are you going to treat individuals who took up arms and fought? If they fought against the United States forces, or the United States allies, as Mr. Lind did, and others in Syria, then I believe they're enemy combatants. We're not here to rehabilitate enemy combatants. We're here to detain them and to prevent them from taking more lives or causing harm to the United States.
The burden ends up here on the United States, because their home countries, respective home countries, are just going to go, oh, no, it's okay. We don't want them. United States, you just deal with them. So this conversation, Patrick, that you and I are having, is this a conversation that the Pentagon is having, the State Department's having, the CIA is having, the Senate is having, or all of them? I mean, there really needs to be some kind of a commission, I would think, here at some point, that comes out with some kind of a game plan.
The answer to that question is yes, they are talking about it. Whether those agencies that you mentioned, the Pentagon, the intelligence community, the Department of Justice, the State Department, my fear is that they're not talking to each other. They need to talk to each other. There needs to be some sort of, you know what I'm saying? I mean, this is what happens. Everybody has their own territorial rights. Well, I'm the intelligence community, and therefore this is my view, and I'm the State Department, and this is my diplomatic view, and this is the Pentagon's view, which is the defense of the United States, and then there's the Department of Justice. They need to be talking to each other. And again, I go back to some of the things that Andy McCarthy has put forth are things that I think they need to get down on and explore and come up with a cohesive decision. And it may be that a panel is needed or a commission is needed to study this. Because otherwise what we're doing is we're kind of like fishing. You know, we catch a fish and then we take them and we put them in, another pond. We haven't decided how to treat this particular situation in a cohesive way.
I would argue
confusion is weakness.
Yeah, and the argument is now. I mean, the solution is now. Somebody better figure it out, because there's these discussions. Hey, Kurds, I mean, you got 2,000 over here, but they can't handle the burden. Someone's going to need to be financing those detentions. So let 800 of them go. We got these over here in Iraq. We've got these over. I mean, I see a new Camp Bucca emerging here if it's not going to be Guantanamo.
Right. You're exactly correct.
It's on your shoulders, Patrick. You fix
Iraq,
it.
And that's how we got ISIS. We threw all the fish into one pond, that prison Camp Bucca, and all they did is coordinate with each other, and they formed a structure for the Islamic State. If we do that just in another place, in Syria, what's going to be the end result of that? The end result is going to be that somehow another group, a hybrid group of a radical Islamic, if it's not Al Qaeda, and this whole radical Islamic jihadist movement has migrated and morphed and metastasized into different forms.
And goes on to another. It goes on to another generation
and another name, but its goal is the same, which is to fight, to create jihad as the purity of the world through this Islamic, radical Islamic movement.
So we almost have to go back 18, 19 years now to the discussions that the Bush administration was having legally with all of those piece parts. We're going to end up having the very same debate 20 years later. I mean, we haven't, and we thought, great, they did the best they could. We're going to find out that is the best solution, whatever, they were doing, meaning Guantanamo or some of these other I see this as being an unresolved thing right now. So a year from now, it's going to look exactly the same as it does today. I don't want to be the pessimist. I guess I'm just being a realist, because Germany sent a pile of them, a bunch of them into Islamic State, France, countries in North Africa. Goodness, Patrick, this is I would say a debate that is, I'm not sure there's a modern day solution other than what we've already done 20 years ago.
No, and in fact, the individuals that are being held at Guantanamo right now, the mastermind of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, we still haven't had the military tribunal hearings finalized. So that's the issue. If you're just going to hold them if we decide to treat them as enemy combatants, but we don't go through with the full military tribunal, then what do we have? Again, we're just throwing these guys or women or whoever they are into a pond, and that's not going to be a solution. It's only going to be a temporary delay in what inevitably will have to happen.
Well, they say at the end of the war, you send them back and, their home countries are supposed to deal with it. But now those home countries are saying no. And I don't believe that we're going to necessarily have an end to these hostilities. I mean, that's what, is out there. We can liberate a town and destroy the territory that Islamic State has, but we haven't done anything about the ideology. So onward we go.
Right. And that gets us back to John Walker Lynn and that whole story that was reported that he has not renounced
No.
radical Islam. In fact, he still studies in prison for this path to Islamic purity, which includes jihad. So if we have all these enemy combatants before we release them, and we talked to them and it said, yes, I'm still committed to the battle. Well, you don't release them. It's that simple. Yes. Imagine if you had a sex offender and it comes up for parole and you say, have you changed? And he says, no, I'm going to still be a pedophile. Or a burglar says, no, I'm going to still go out and rob people. You're not going to parole him. You're not going to release him. If you have a terrorist who says, I'm still going to commit terrorist
I'm in the
acts,
fight.
I have not changed from the ideology that motivated my actions, well then, why would you release him?
Well, I'm going to be snarky and say a drone with a Hellfire missile and Anwar al-Awlaki comes to mind. That was just kind of my snarkiness here. I don't think we could do that on our home soil, but this
and there has to be, I think, what you brought up, some sort of panel or commission that actually tries to come up with an end game solution, whether it's a registration system for convicted terrorists who have served their time in prison and you can't hold them beyond their time, or it's enemy combatants who are being held and need to go through a military tribunal. But that there has to be a consensus between agencies like the intelligence community, the Justice Department, the State Department, and the Pentagon. Those things have to take place.
Mr. Patrick Dunleavy, thanks for being with us in this fascinating conversation and what you bring to the discussion for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience, and we'll see you again very soon.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.